You're listening to the Afterburn Podcast, episode number 1.
He said, hey, I was there. I remember when you guys came like flying out of the weather, dispensing flares, and then came around the corner and lit up the tree line. He goes, that was like one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I'm like, well, dude, that's what we trained for, and we're there to support you.
Tower fire stations release you, runway 4 left, wind 040 at 5, clear for takeoff.
Seat tied, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Fire protector. My right ramp curve was at 354. Set.
Viper 01, be advised, the restricted area 6002 is still active.
Next, picture 16, 15,000, targets in the back. Viper 1 targeted.
Hello and welcome to the Afterburn Podcast. I'm your host, John Waters, a former Air Force fighter pilot. Before we begin today, I'd like to thank my sponsor for this episode, Wingman Watches. Wingman Watches is a veteran-owned and operated company. Their impeccable attention to detail truly shows in each one of their timepieces, which are built right here in the United States, and I can attest to that as I own several of their watches. They're great for group customization orders. If you're a military unit, fire department, police department, law enforcement agency, sports team, whatever it might be, wants to create a custom watch, Wingman Watch is the place for you to go. Mention my name and you'll receive a discount on your custom order. If you go over to wingmanwatch.com and you find something you really like, you can use the code RAIN10, that's RAIN10, and receive 10% off your purchase. I'd also thank Jello, a former F-18 pilot and host of the Fighter Pilot Podcast, for helping me out with this, as well as Mr. Matt Jolly, who has been instrumental in getting this podcast up and running and guiding me through this space. You can find Matt over at warbirdradio.com, where this podcast will be hosted. He's also co-host of Show Center, the Air Show podcast, one of my favorites. And you can also find him over at historyworthsaving.com. He's all over the place. Again, Jello at the Fighter Pilot Podcast and Matt Jolly at warbirdradio.com. Go over and check those guys out. And finally, before we get rolling today, I would just like to say thank you for listening in. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review. That feedback is definitely crucial to me as I shape this podcast, because it'll undoubtedly evolve as I move forward. But those two little things make a big difference. If you're looking for some additional content, you can swing over to Instagram at RainWaters27 for some more content. With that said, let's get after it.
Okay, got the red smoke.
Gun runs north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. Commander's initials, Bravo Golf. Keep the fire west of the smoke. We have 3 smokes pop.
Okay, copy that. I am visual the smoke. I'm going to keep my fires west of the smoke and west of the road.
Roger, I see you. Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot. Got visual the smoke.
My guest today is Major Tyler Leeroy Schultz, the United States Air Force A-10 pilot. And on May 2nd, 2017, he would find himself in a situation that you just heard. Troops in contact. That's friendly forces on the ground that are cut off and surrounded, taking heavy enemy fire, and they need help from above. On that day, Captain Samantha Jammer Harvey and Leeroy would arrive overhead in Shaddadi, Syria, and ultimately save the lives of 50 U.S. troops and numerous coalition forces. Their actions would earn them both the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is awarded for heroism and extraordinary achievement during aerial flight. Listen in today to hear about Leeroy's journey to becoming an Air Force A-10 pilot and the actions he took on May 2nd, 2017 that ultimately earned him a Distinguished Flying Cross. Leeroy, thanks for joining me on the podcast. I know everyone's going to be really excited to hear about your journey to becoming an Air Force A-10 pilot. And then, like me, really curious to hear about your actions on May 2nd, 2017. Before we get into all that, why don't you tell everyone a little about who you are and what you're doing.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for having me, John. Tyler Schultz, go by Leeroy, as you mentioned, A-10 reservist right now, also working for United Airlines. So went to the academy in 2003, started there. After finishing up school, got to Columbus, Mississippi as a training in the Air Force pilot training there. Had met my wife prior to leaving the academy, and so we got married right after pilot training. Blessed with 4 awesome little kids, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So she's definitely really busy. And then let's see, finished up pilot training. Flew the T-38 for a couple years. I did MC-12s as well, like you did. So have some shared flying experiences there. And then tracked A-10s. Very fortunate to get that out of pilot training, or that second round with all the FAPEs. And then I've been doing A-10s for the last 6 or 7 years at this point.
So you just summarized like the last half of your life in just
exactly.
a little blip. So yeah, you go to the Air Force Academy, you graduate, you get a pilot slot, you go down to Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi, like I do, for pilot training. And then at the end of pilot training, you become a first assignment instructor pilot, or as we call it, a FAPE. So you're a FAPE there in Columbus, like I am. And that after a 3-year assignment there, you wrap that up and you end up moving on to the A-10 and flying the Mighty Hog. But before we talk about how awesome the Hog is, I really like to talk about the Air Force Academy, because you just said, hey, I went to the Academy, and you made it sound really easy, but it is not an easy thing, 1, to get into the Air Force Academy, and then 2, to graduate from the Air Force Academy. So for those who don't know, there are 3 commissioning sources. That's to become an officer in the Air Force. There's the Air Force Academy, Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC is what I did. And then there's OTS, Officer Training School. And that's another discussion for another day, but can you kind of allude to what you had to do, Leeroy, in order to go to the Air Force Academy and how difficult it was?
Right, definitely. So let's see, in 95, my family moved from Chicago to Georgia. And I was really fortunate. One of my good friends in Peachtree City's dad was an academy graduate and a pilot as well. And I had just asked him, like, so I want to do that. How do I become a pilot? And his track was through the academy as well. And so it was funny. He told me to get a haircut because I had shaggy hair at the time, and go join Eagle or Boy Scouts, become an Eagle Scout. And then he kind of walked me through the rest of the steps, like staying up with your grades, applying to, be in AP courses or those classes so that looks good on your resume, staying involved in a sport, but specifically not being like the captain of the team. Like, obviously if you can do that, that's great, but just like staying dedicated to something. They wanted to see like, hey, you had the dedication to go be a Boy Scout, make it all the way to Eagle Scout, go join a soccer team and play it for 3-4 years, pick up an instrument, which I definitely did not do, but something where they showed just the dedication of, hey, you might actually stick out the academy and make it all 4 years. I think that was some of the good advice that he gave.
Man, you had some great points there. And it's kind of funny. We grew up in the same hometown and didn't know each other. We knew of each other, I guess, but didn't really get to know each other until we got to Columbus many years later. But similar paths, we both knew early on what we wanted to do.
Right.
And we went out there and sought people who had walked that path before, sought guidance to help us kind of figure out what we needed to do and how to go after it. But I think it's crucial. Anyone, no matter who you are, what age, like you have to have some kind of passion that you want to go out there and pursue. We were fortunate, I think, and knew at a young age, but not everyone is going to be in that same scenario. I think the takeaways are, 1, you have to have a passion in life and go out there and pursue it. You want to be the best at what you do, knowing that there's going to be setbacks that come along with it and hurdles, but finding a mentor, finding guidance, seeking help is so crucial, because if you're willing to put in the time, effort, and work and the dedication to it, having someone that can kind of help you answer tricky questions or when you get in a sticky situation is always vital.
Right.
So you get accepted to the Air Force Academy. That's a challenge in itself, but it's a path to become a pilot and get a pilot slot out of that. but the tough part's not over. It really has just begun, right? Like it's not just an easy cakewalk from that point forward, right?
No, so the I guess one of the benefits of the academy over a ROTC program is they have about half of their students become pilots. So they have a bunch of pilot slots, and so I got there, like you said, doesn't get much easier. So yeah, you finish your maybe something not quite what am I trying to say? Once you get out of high school, you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing well. Like I got to the academy, right? And then you get there with 1,200 other people who did the exact same thing, and you're like, oh, okay, so now I'm getting a C in Calc 2. Like that's not cool. Like,
Yeah, going from like probably the best or one of the best guys in your high school to like, sweet, you are no longer special.
right, exactly. So yeah, it's and then the whole beginning of the academy is about breaking you down in basic training and making you one of the team or one of the Air Force and not an individual. So they do a good job at assimilating everyone, if you will.
You are not special. Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's all again like we're all working towards the same common goal, and what we probably don't
right.
realize at the time, break you down a little bit to build you back up into the mold they want you to be.
Yep.
So obviously you work really hard throughout your 4 years at Air Force Academy. You get a pilot's slot, and then you're off to Columbus Air Force Base to learn how to fly. And then for those who don't know, pilot training is about a year long, although it's going through some changes right now. I think where you can go a little bit faster, a little bit slower, where they're trying to streamline it. But out of the pilot training, much like me, you become a FAPE, a first assignment instructor pilot in the T-38. What was like being a T-38 instructor?
Honestly, at first you're kind of, oh man, I'm a FAPE. I wanted to go out and do the mission or whatever. Then they send you to Randolph, and you go through instructor training for a couple of months, and you come back. And I had guys that were 1 year below me at the academy that were coming through, and now I'm teaching them how to fly a plane that I have maybe 150 hours in. It was eye opening. It was really cool. They definitely give you a lot of rope, especially as a first lieutenant, and you're sitting there instructing, taking kids cross country, just leaning on the limited experience that you have and your knowledge of what sounds right or what should be correct there, and teaching. So it was pretty cool. I think you probably had a similar experience, right? With just the amount of rope that they give you as such a young pilot is just like unheard of in an active squadron or an op squadron.
Yeah, I think that's what and I told people, when I was going through being a FAPE, nowhere else, I think, in the world are you going to be a 24, 25-year-old and get the keys thrown at you to a multi-million-dollar jet, and you're going to take someone who is fresh off the streets, more or less, with just a couple flying hours, and you're going to go take them out and teach them how to fly this complex aircraft, especially the T-38.
Yeah.
The T-38, I got a lot of respect for. I mean, designed late 50s, 60s. It's still flying today. Thing has got tiny little wings, so it's got to go really fast, right? And like you could kill yourself in the T-38 in the final turn really quick, right?
That was one of the most interesting or eye-opening portions of the experience. You remember the 38 when you go around the corner and they said, okay, when you get that little rumble on the wing, that's good. That's your final turn. But when it really starts, the elephant's dancing on your wing, that's bad. And you're like, how do I know when an elephant's dancing on my wing? And why is this plane designed to shake it?
I think that's really cool about the Air Force, where again, you can be a really young guy or gal, and you have a lot of responsibilities placed in your hands right off the get-go. And it's life or death. Like it's a serious business, even when you're training, because one small mistake can lead to something that's unrecoverable.
Yeah. One of my, I was talking to another pilot recently about configuration errors. And I remember taking off with a kid, and we're doing a pattern delay. So you're already taking this minimal winged aircraft, and then you're putting it heavy weight and trying to do a pattern delay. And he got behind and forgot to put the flaps down. And I was, trying to keep up with him and the jet and what we were doing, and didn't check the configuration. And all of a sudden you get ground rush. And that was one of the, okay, afterburner, go around, look down, see the configuration. I'm like, dude, you didn't even put the flaps down. Like, we can't do a no flap heavyweight like this.
Oh man, that makes me cringe.
I know exactly. Like you just kind of see those things that you're, as a lieutenant trying to teach another lieutenant, and you're like, oh my goodness, yeah, it brings you, definitely makes you, tighten your parameters, eye opening a little bit, right?
I think that's a really good point. I think we've all been there. I know I've done it. It's been a couple times in my career. And it's usually when you're rushed. That's when it
Yeah,
always happens. Like your jet breaks, you step to a spare, you're trying to make it, and then like you forget something critical. I have definitely taken off with my ejection seat not armed.
oh yeah,
Yeah, definitely not where you want to be. But I think it drives from the fact that we all make mistakes, no matter how experienced we are. And it's how we recover from that situation. Ideally, we identify it quickly and then not allow that one mistake to snowball into more mistakes. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're flying, if you're woodworking, playing a sport, if you let one mistake affect the entire event, performance, action, whatever it might be, it's only going to get worse from there.
yeah. When it also makes you think about all the following steps. You're like, okay, so I was definitely a place where I was missing things. What else did I do? Or,
Y-
like,
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a testament, man. It's like we all make mistakes. Uh,
yeah,
obviously, recognizing those as quickly as possible and recovering from them is key. And all of them are going to be different situations, but
right. And that's a huge part
I
of our
think,
culture, though, too, to recognize that you are going to make mistakes and, hopefully share it with the team, right?
yeah, that piece. I think there are some communities out there that get it, and obviously, it's a backbone of being an aviator in the Air Force, especially being a fighter pilot, is owning it because we are like none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, but when you
Right.
make a mistake, is owning it, uh, and then sharing that lesson learned with the bros so they don't make the same mistake. And there's like a lot of people out there I just don't think get that, and like the fastest way to lose credibility in my mind is when you make a mistake and you try to hide it. Like
Yeah.
people are going to find out about it, and the minute they find out about it, now your judgment, your trustability, all that comes into question. It's just a spot you never want to find yourself in.
Yeah, for sure.
And I am by no means perfect, and it's definitely one of those things that as you get older you realize the importance of, if you make a mistake, to own it and acknowledge it. And it doesn't matter, if you're a pilot, a firefighter, a mom, a dad, lawyer, whatever it might be. I think no matter who we are all going to make mistakes. The trick becomes recognizing those mistakes faster and
Yeah.
faster, learning from those mistakes. And then often the tough one that I struggle with is when the mistake happens and you recognize it, don't allow that mistake to affect whatever it is you're doing, which will subsequently lead to more mistakes. You got to compartmentalize it, put it away, figure out what happened later on and prevent it from happening again. And ideally, you share that mistake with someone so that they can learn from it and not make the same one that you did. So the Air Force definitely affords lots of opportunities to go out there and do different things and learn. You and I had a unique experience that while we were first assignment instructor pilots, FAPEs, you and I both deployed. Can you tell me a little about the King Air 350, the MC-12 mission, what that was like for you and some of your experiences there?
It was cool as a young FAPE, I think, to go out and get some of the operational side of it. But I feel like it was definitely a confirmation of what I wanted to do after being a FAPE, because you get to experience some of the ISR, the sitting in a overhead pattern and, watching things develop and building the intelligence side of it. But then it was a lot more fun, I'd say, passing that information onto a set of Vipers or Hogs and watching them go strike it. And I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. So the MC-12, I mean, it's an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance mission. You're out there hunting people or supporting ground forces, looking for improvised explosive devices, doing a whole slew of different missions. You're in a crew plane, flying around. It was a good experience, I would say, but it definitely reaffirmed my decision or my belief that I want to go out there and fly a fighter and do something different.
Exactly.
So you come back from the MC-12, you spend a little bit more time in the T-38 for about a year, but then you move on to the Mighty Hog, flying the A-10. Can you tell me about the transition to the A-10?
Yeah, that was That was pretty cool. So, yep, I came back from the MC-12, had about a year in the T-38, left, and then went out to Arizona, Davis Monthan, for the upgrade in the A-10. About 6 months of program there. Uh, I think I had maybe 11 or 12 dudes in my class. It was, still have some of the, my greatest buddies are from that group, because when you, again, go through something tough like a pilot training experience, and you're learning this whole new aircraft, right? And the first flight in the A-10 is single seat, because we don't have any two-seat models. So that's, you go through some sims, and then you get out there and your first takeoff, it's a pretty easy aircraft to take off. I think most aircraft, they keep it on the runway and you rotate and it's great. And then you're like, oh, I have to come back and land this thing.
Don't bring it weak.
I know. I remember that being one of my thoughts. Like, well, now I'm airborne. I guess I got to do this.
There's no plan B, right? Like, exactly. you must win here. So Leeroy, you wrap up the B course and then you're off to Korea for your first assignment flying the Mighty Hog, right?
Right. Yeah. First assignment was Korea, and that was that's a really we have Korea, Valdosta, Georgia, at Moody, and then DM are the three bases that they tend to still have the active duty squadrons at. And so a lot of the guys told me as a FAPE to go to Korea, because you get a lot of flying experience immediately. And in that 1 year, you can get an upgrade to kind of catch back up to your peer group a little bit, from being a FAPE and not flying the A-10 for those couple of years. So yeah, we had a great time. It was an unaccompanied tour, but I brought the family out. I had 2 kids at the time, and my wife was pregnant with our third, so she went through the experience of having a baby overseas and all of that international fun.
Oh man, yeah, you're racking up the IOUs.
Yeah, well, especially since I went to Alaska on a red flag for like a month and a half after our third was born. So that was good.
Leeroy, dude, you're nailing it, man. I don't know how you're still alive, leaving your wife with 3 kids, one being a newborn, and then you head off to Red Flag, Alaska, which is, those who don't know, a TDY, a temporary duty assignment, big exercise we do up in Alaska, which is usually a pretty good time. I mean, there's some work to be had, but I don't know if it's on the same level as leaving your wife unaccompanied in a foreign country with a newborn. Dude, I don't even know how you're still alive today. I'm impressed. And your wife is a saint. So moving past that, but Korea, I never got to go there. That is a staple for the F-16 and the A-10 community. What was Korea like? How did you like that assignment?
Right, with our bases out there, and the it's good because the squadron and the close knit like group there, the community is huge, and the since you don't have the other families or friends that aren't in your squadron there, right? Because you're off in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country. You build that group, and it's really it was a fun experience.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, that we could touch on is the camaraderie of it all, because, when you go through pilot training, that's a year long and you guys are just slugging it out, trying to make it to the end and not get crushed. But out of that becomes, this bonding that you have all these people from all walks of life come together, experiencing the same, I wouldn't say miserable experience. I actually enjoyed pilot training, but it was a lot of work. Um, and so when it comes time, when you're off work, you guys are usually hanging out, the families are hanging out. So you really get a tight knit community. And for me, that was really important. I know it exists in other places in the world, but having that camaraderie, having that team there of like-minded individuals. And that was kind of the nice thing when you went to a new fighter squadron, you walked in and instantaneously you have 20 or 30 brand new best friends. And again, I think the military that exists and throughout various communities, it was something that I really liked and enjoyed. And my wife enjoyed it. Son enjoyed it. It was something to really embrace, is that camaraderie that you're bonded together through these experiences, and you have all these people to help you get along, get through it.
It was a huge factor as well when we're considering getting out of active duty. Was are we ready to leave this close knit community? That you've had for the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to give up. It's I don't know, once you used to it, it's like, I don't know what else is out there. So um,
Exactly.
it definitely makes for the tough times. And, when you're not having, I guess, great experiences or through losses, deployments, things like that, having that community definitely helps pull everyone together. And I think it's something that's fairly unique.
Right.
So shifting gears a little bit, now you and your team, you're down in Valdosta, Georgia, Moody Air Force Base, South Georgia. Lovely spot. I've been there once or twice. Spent about a year and a half there, actually. Um, and you're getting ready to go out the door to support Operation Inherent Resolve. That's the fight against ISIS. So that was January 2017, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So January 2017, squadron deployed out to Incirlik in Turkey, so right near Adana. And that was during the time frame of, ISIS had control over northern Iraq and Mosul, and then a huge, group amount of territory, I guess, in Syria, especially in the Raqqa area, was kind of where our deployment was mainly concentrated.
So Leroy, you guys are there for about 5 months, and you get tasked to go out on a close air support mission out to Mosul, Iraq. And I would imagine it's like most sorties you've been doing to that point, and that was kind of your expectation going out the door, something relatively benign.
Yeah, and it was almost even more so an expectation that we weren't going to do that much on that day because the weather was so bad. A lot of times when we had like an overcast deck or something and we were holding high above it, you ended up not doing a whole lot because you can't provide any sensor support. All of the UAVs are either not flying because the weather's too bad, or they can't see anything, so they can't update. And a lot of times the guys on the ground aren't outside uh, patrolling or doing anything because the weather's bad. So we kind of took off expecting that we were going to fight some weather, get up above the clouds, and just sort of hold out for a couple hours. We even asked our DO, I remember, before we took off because the icing was pretty bad around this time of year. And we had some, the A-10 engines are amazing, but they were getting some bent fan blades and um, some issues that we jets were coming back with icing, and so we're like, "Hey, you're sure you want us to fly? It's probably not going to be much. The weather looks terrible, and we're running out of fan blades." And the DO, I remember it. Wolf is his call sign, and he says, "We're A-10 bots. That's what we do." I'm like,
Copy.
okay, all right, sweet, yeah, just make sure. Yeah, but and I mean, he's right because he said, "All right, that's what we do." And I'm like, okay, so I was switching from a night line to the early morning line, so we were taking off just before sunrise and heading east, climb up like we planned, right through the weather. We're tracking out east to get our in gas over northern Syria, and I remember talking with the flight lead, who was a two-ship flight lead at the time, and I was a ops instructor pilot, but just switching to this line, so they put me with as number two to you kind of get a little bit of the morning experience, some of the just shifting to the new line or whatever. Is typically put the first sortie as a number two, and so we're getting into the AR track, and A-10 doesn't have radar, so there's really not a whole lot of ways to get a tanker in the weather besides cornering them and getting close. And so I remember her asking me like, "Hey, any tricks to find the tanker?" I was just like, "Yeah, you got to put them in a corner and then get up right up underneath them, and hopefully you break out." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Easy, right?
Yeah, easy. So especially, yeah, so we just tell the tanker, "Hey, we need you in the northwest side of the track. You confirm altitudes, altimeters, all of that, and then you start at 1,000, and you can work your way up to about 500 below their track." And thankfully, we found a open patch of the weather, and we're able to get some gas. The our initial tasking was done to Ross Leeroy, which is funny. It was definitely not named after me, which is a good thing, right? Normally, don't
Yeah.
want stuff named after you.
Yeah, no, that's not a
Uh,
good thing.
So we were tested just to do some overwatch, and there that was like the Raqqa area. Uh, that Roz controlled that airspace. And I remember she got gas first. Typically, we won, then two. And while I was on the boom, we got a mission amends, which was like a digital version of sending us a tasking. Um, it was not very common, but immediately after we got the mission amends, we got a call saying, "Hey, call ready, update tasking. You guys are supporting a U.S. troops in contact near," and then they passed us grids and a quick UHF frequency, and that was. I still get the hair in the back of your neck stands up as soon as they say that U.S. troops in contact was. It was definitely one of those almost out of body experiences, and something that we didn't expect to hear, because U.S. troops weren't really on the front lines in the Syria or Mosul area, and with the weather being like it was, we didn't expect to really do much today. So I remember that being definitely something I'm not going to forget, that experience.
Yeah, I actually had a similar experience. It was about 4 or 5 months into my deployment. We were there just a few years ahead of you guys, and we took off on a day where there was a sandstorm from eastern Iraq all the way to western Syria. And so we had low expectations that we were going to do anything that day, just based on the fact that we couldn't see the ground. However, like during our second or third air refueling, we came off the tanker, and an A-10 heard our call sign when we checked in with air traffic control. He called out to us and said that he was going to get out of the jet, that he just lost the motor. So we immediately turned, trying to find him and his wingman, coordinated with various agencies. But right when we heard that, the adrenaline was through the roof,
Yeah.
because his life is on the line, and you want to do everything you can to help out. So I really don't think there's anything else that will get the adrenaline pumping faster than when you hear a friendly force that is in dire need and needs your help.
Right. That adrenaline, it started then, and I think it ended about 6 hours later when I was almost back to Interlaken.
Yeah, dude. I mean, just hearing it just reminds me of my experience, and hearing your story, with American
Yeah.
troops in contact, hearing that on the radio. I mean, that just gets everything amped up. So you
Right.
guys get that tasking. And you're flying with Captain Samantha Jammer Harvey.
Right.
So she,
Yep. Jammer was a flight lead. So we got the tasking. She started plotting the grids. I'm still finishing up our getting gas in the weather, which isn't like the easiest feat, but at this point it's like the lowest on your priority list, right? You're like, oh yeah, I'll get gas, I'll plot these grids, we'll figure out what frequency, where we're going, like try to get everything sort of like compartmentalized into what your next step is. And I remember her getting on the radio, making an initial contact with Arcane was the call sign, Arcane 5-3, and then me contacting Kingpin, which was like our CRC, and getting deconfliction for our basically from our tanker track to that airspace, getting all the separate kill boxes around there. And since it was such bad weather, we basically got from surface to, I think it was 19,000 feet is what we initially had, because there was no one in the area, and the weather went up to 20. So it didn't matter. Like we were, no one else was up in that airspace. So yeah, we get off the tanker, we start pressing there. And thankfully, since, we're not mock, we're not fast. These grids they passed were only like 50 miles away. So from getting that initial notification, finishing up our gas, and getting over to Arcane's position, doing a weather letdown, and all of that, it took about 10 minutes to get overhead.
you're talking about being overhead, Arcane 5-3, the JTAC, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller. And he's translating what's going on the ground to pilot speak so that you can affect the fight there. And there's a lot going on here. Not only are you deconflicting from your A-10 flight lead, you have the tanker there, you're trying to figure out where to go. And it's not just like a moving map in the A-10. You're having to punch in coordinates, look at maps, and figure out where you need to go. Balancing all that while trying to build your SA for what is going to be needed when you arrive overhead, Arcane's position to help them out on the ground. And then you kind of glossed over it, but you are doing a weather letdown and you're descending through a thunderstorm.
Yeah, weather letdown, exactly.
You can't see the ground.
So,
yeah, no big deal.
Right. Yeah, we're in the weather around 18,000 feet on the tanker. We found that little pocket of clear air, and we're sort of in and out of the weather. After she got gas, she, I think, departed low from the tanker, and then I was still on it. So I depart off the tanker, and now it's sort of we're in this stack where I'm in a somewhat visual, somewhat instrument trail off of her through the weather, and then we point towards our next point, like I said, about 50 miles away. And as we're coordinating this, we kind of figure out what the min safe altitude is for the area we're going to. And you start basically just a descent where she goes through 15, I'm at 16, she's done a 12, I'm at 13. We kind of step our way down to get below the clouds and make sure you're safe for that lowest altitude that you can go down to. And we ended up breaking out of the weather around 7,000 feet for 7,000 feet MSL, which was about 6 or so AGL for this area that we were in Shadadi that we ended up supporting.
Yeah. And so during this, right, you're again maintaining deconfliction from your flight lead, descending through the weather. Now that you got a pretty good idea what the terrain is, you got to figure out what, no kidding, we know it's kind of relatively
Right.
flat out that way, but there could be some hills. So now you can't see. There's no GPWIS in the A-10 telling you to pull up. You got ATC radio going, and now I know she's probably trying to talk to Arcane 5.3, the Joint Terminal Attack Controller on the ground.
Exactly.
And with the weather, probably his terrain, and then the gunfire, it's probably pretty challenging to talk to him in order to build a picture for both of you, war flight, as far as what's going on the ground and what's needed, right?
Yeah, the hearing gunfire on the radio from the guy on the ground is again another one of those experiences that when you train, like we train so many times in the A-10 to support our troops in contact, and as the flight lead, you try to, or as an instructor, you try to build that like realism, right? And talk with a sense of urgency, and maybe you're screaming into the radio. Well, when you hear it for real life and the real life gunfire in the background, and you're trying to just internalize all of the data, you're looking at your map, trying to get a layout from the initial point that is passed or where it's located. And then that was, I think it was just 11 minutes. So had gone on by from the initial notification, and we're sitting, in the weather, to being overhead Arcane's position, kind of building out that picture of his compound where he's taking fire from, and trying to build a 9-line now so we can start affecting the fight. So we got down below the weather, 7,000 feet. I was in a trail on a jammer. We're flying over top. All we had was the location of the friendly grids, right? So that's what we have in our system that we're steering towards. And then we get over top and we just start dropping out flares, do a show of force, probably around 4,000 or 5,000 feet AGL, because we're still trying to pick up, build our picture, and it's in the middle of a rainstorm. So we just start dropping off flares overhead. And I remember as you're flying over, you're dropping flares to kind of announce your presence to the enemy, like, hey, we're here, stop shooting at friendlies. But you're also giving that to the army that's on the ground. And I got a text one day about a year or so after this sortie from one of the guys, the army troops, that found my number through something, probably after the DFC write-up. And he said, hey, I was there. I remember when you guys came like flying out of the weather, dispensing flares, and then came around the corner and lit up the tree line. He goes, that was like one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I'm like, well, dude, that's what we train for, and we're there to support you. But that was really cool that, that you give that sense of probably adrenaline and safety almost, that you're trying to just announce to the friendlies that you're there to hopefully protect.
Leeroy, that's awesome, especially hearing that from one of the guys on the ground, the impact that you guys had that day in helping them with that fight. I'd like to read a little bit from one of the awards you received. It says, Below the weather, visibility was between 1 and 5 miles due to heavy rain, making it difficult to see the friendly position. And I can imagine everything there is brown and gray, which only amplifies how difficult it is to see. It says, despite this, Captain Harvey led the formation over friendlies in a show of force, with flares to deter the enemy aggression. She visually acquired the building the friendlies were in and the field the enemy was attacking from. She immediately turned around and marked the field with a rocket so Major Schultz can get his eyes on the target area. Major Schultz was able to roll in with a 30 millimeter strafing pass with corrections from Arcane 5.3 off Captain Harvey's rocket mark. So there's a lot going on there as well. How difficult is the mech in order to flip all those switches, get the aircraft in a position where it can fire rockets, can fire the gun, and affect the fight there? I know there's got to be a lot going on inside Jammer's cockpit as well as yours.
Yeah, I mean, so we're descending into the target area. You're so, you're focused on, like you said, so many things in that descent as you're trying to do all the communication and find the area and then build that picture. And as soon as we overflew, thankfully, the enemy had picked a tree line to shoot from, and it was across a field. We had the helmet, so it's basically the little monocle that helps, put some of the things that you're seeing on your moving map right in your eye. And then when you look over the rail at the ground, you can see them kind of displaced on your reticle. So that helped. Okay, that's the building. It made sense based off of what the friendly was saying, where they were located. They were taking fire. I believe he was calling it. It was 45 degrees off reality, which was difficult. So this whole compound laid northeast, southwest. But I think in his mind, it was east-west. And so he was taking fire to the south in the tree line. Well, there's only one tree line, and that tree line was about 100 meters or so to his, what would that be, southeast. And so we went with it in the directions, knowing where he was and knowing the tree line. But that was definitely something later in the sortie we had to confirm with him, because his directions were about 45 degrees off of what we were seeing, which is, but yeah, so we get to do that. We're flying, do this quick circle overhead, building our 9 line for him, because obviously he's, really busy. So we're friendly location, distance, direction, and then thinking about, okay, fencing in. Typically, our training is to flight lead fence in with rockets and guns. So they have the Willie Pete rockets to roll in and mark. And then the wingman is in a deep trail or wedge position, so 1.5 miles, 2 miles, so that after the flight lead shoots a rocket, hopefully Arcane can give an update off that Willie Pete white phosphorus smoke and say like, oh, yep, from there 50 meters, and give you a direction to shift your fire to be effective on that first pass.
And that's what it sounds like you guys did on that first pass.
Yeah.
She was able to shoot the rocket, and then you're able to correct off that.
Exactly. It was about 50 meters or so to the north, which was a northeast correction along the tree line for that first shot.
So again, you guys are Boar 5-1 flight. You continue to deploy 30 millimeter on enemy location, completing 6 total strafing runs in near zero visibility.
Yeah.
During those 6 strafing runs, you employed 30 millimeter rounds, 40 meters from friendlies, well within danger close distances. And as you just, again, you alluded to, Arcane giving you directions about 45 degrees off. Yeah, that puts a question mark over your head there. And the worst thing we could do is hurt friendlies. So I know, just strafing and dropping bombs, when you hear danger close, again, that's another one of those things I think that just keys up the adrenaline, knowing that, what you're doing has to be absolutely correct and right, because there's no tolerance for error, right? Like
exactly
inside that distance, like there's errors inside the weapons that could potentially hurt friendlies, and they have to acknowledge that by giving the ground commander's initials for danger close, accepting the risk there. So what was going through your mind when you guys got those initials?
Well, so that first pass was effective. We came off to the north, and then you like to try to vary your indirection based off of, this pretty large group of ISIS probably has, some sort of AAA or potentially even a man pad that they can shoot at you. And so you don't want to just be very, in from the south, and just like predictable. We came off to the north, and then we're going to be back in from the northwest this time on another pass. She shot on the second pass. I called in, and I didn't get clearance. And again, it's something that you're like, oh, we're danger close. It was, I would say, type 2 still, because the arcane did not have the time to find us and see where our nose was pointing, because he was so busy shooting back as well and running for better vantage points and stuff like that. But as I rolled in, I didn't get clearance. And so I'm down final. You're like, well, I know I'm shooting at the same area, but you're like, well, it's danger close. So you can't fire without the clearance. So I come off, and it was just his radio at the time was so busy with other things going on, the ground fire. He even like lost radio contact for a while due to his batteries like getting waterlogged, and had to change the batteries out while he was running around on the ground. So that was like you said, just that danger close part, and it brings in so much more complexity to it. We eventually split the target area north south. So she was holding on the north, I was holding on the south side of it, because I couldn't keep sight of her through the weather, and also help out with keeping like an essay on the ground. So I would just have to be like tucked in, almost in like a close position, based off how thick the rainstorm was. So then she came in from the north on another gun pass. This is probably like our third or fourth pass, and was off dry due to it just couldn't see the ground. So then I rolled in for the south, and again, it's like, well, yeah, I want to affect the fight, but if I can't see, or I can't put the weapon down on the appropriate target, so now it was like pushing. I think I was on a 20 has pass at this point, because we were down so low due to the clouds. And like you said, you're driving in, you're looking for the friendly area, making sure you're exactly on your target. And something interesting in the A-10, you can see outside our side panels very well, but the front windscreen is flat, and so that will get blocked by the rain. So afterwards, watching my tape, I was doing like a rudder push, where you can like push to the side and you see out the side of your aircraft, and then you look over your HUD and you find that point. But that was one of the most difficult strafe passes that I've ever made, was in the weather on that 20 has.
And for those who don't know, has high angle strafe. So that's the angle you're attacking the target at. And we have different types of attack depending on weather and desired weapons effects and things of that nature. But you guys are working hard, and that sounds absolutely terrible, having to use the rudder to strafe. So at this time in the fight, you guys are getting low on gas, and Jammer elects to start yo-yo ops. Can you tell me a little bit about what yo-yo ops are?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, our biggest priority at this point is not to leave Arcane. We're the only set of air assets that he has, and we don't want to leave him alone. So we split up to keep one person on station while the other person goes and gets gas. It reduces our level of mutual support and protection, but it doesn't leave him. And so that was what we were doing there. So she goes to find the tanker. Again, she went back up into the soup of 7 to 20,000 feet, and we can't tank above 18 or 19 because we don't have enough power. So she jumps into the weather to go find gas, and we kind of had a little bit of a lull here. That's why we ended up getting gas at this point. And my priority once we started doing this was friendly battle tracking and sort of like TRP. So figuring out points on the ground that we both could identify and use as a reference. And then I also talked to, hey, so there's a main road that goes right through the town, and it looks like that road is northeast southwest. And he goes, nope, I see it east west. I'm like, okay, like if that's what it is, then you got to mentally shift. All right, that's where we're gonna call this, but just so that we're both on the same track.
Yeah, and that's so important no matter what career field you're in and whatever you're operating in, the shared mental model. You are communicating the same language with whoever you're working with, because if you're not, it's not going to go well. And then you mentioned TRP, target reference point. So identifying something that is on the ground that you can adjust fires from, i.e., that tree line that you were talking about, something that you can quickly see, both you from your A-10 and the JTAC on the ground, and you can quickly correct from that point. I don't want to gloss over what Jammer's doing, but I'm going to do that. She's off to the tanker and she's working. Coming from a plane that has a radar, I can fully appreciate the amount of effort she's putting in with no radar and no interrogator to try and help her find the tanker with all the weather that she's doing. But while she's off to the tanker working, you're also working, again, trying to build that shared mental model, that common operating picture with your customer on the ground, the JTAC there.
Well, yeah. So during this time, we're building our picture, and Arcane's starting to take a little bit of fire from the north, and they call it a cupola, or maybe it's a cupola. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but it's basically a little like outhouse type setting on the top of a building. But like you said, all the buildings are brown, and they all look the same, and they all have cupolas or cupolas, whatever you want to call it, on the rooftops. And so I'm trying to get contact for this. And eventually get Arcane to build a 9-line and passes that for one of these rooftops. Meanwhile, when he is building this 9-line, you hear him running, and you can tell by his voice and how he's breathing on the radio, and you're like, wait, this dude is actually running from a building towards the fire that he's taking to go get a better vantage point so he can help call in fires for it. Like it's crazy to see the the JTAC position and what he does or brings to the fight, to help support his troops.
Yeah, those dudes are some incredible human beings. I have so much respect for them. That is
Exactly.
not an easy job, like anyone on the ground there, period. But that too, like just being able to communicate what's going on the ground and translating it to pilot speak so we can figure out how we can help best. So during this time, like he's
Right.
starting to run, the fire's picking up, and then the largest attack kind of kicks off with heavy machine guns, small arms fire, RPGs, and suicide vest. You're able to visually acquire tracer rounds come from a nearby field, and you quickly employ 30 millimeters on that location. The fire intensified, and they began to zero in on the friendly position. And now you're hearing Arcane, you're hearing explosions and gunfire over the radio, which again, I think is just amping up the adrenaline, or at least it would be for me.
Right.
And you go in and you strafe 4 more times, despite the visibility getting continually to deteriorate. So in that short period of time, and you go back in to strafe 1 more additional time, repelling the attack while Jammer is off to the tanker. So real busy point for you here, and again, no real mutual support for you. You're alone and afraid, just trying to help out the guys on the ground as best
Right.
you can. So a busy little period, right?
Yeah. So, and it was crazy because he was building this up, trying to find this couple, trying to give me a 9-line, moving closer to that fire to try to help identify it. I rolled in for like the southwest over the shoulder of the friendlies, so it's one of the calls you make for helping him identify where you're rolling in from, and also passing that. I see where you guys are. I'm coming in from the southwest. So yeah, so we're rolling in, and I strafe from the southwest, and like you said, right as that hit off, they were planning their next attack from the east or southeast and along that tree line, and everything just kicked off. You hear the radios light up, and you see the whole tree line, and the way that the weather was and the atmosphere was there. You could pick out the muzzle flashes really well, and so I just see this whole tree line light up, and from where we had strafed on our previous attacks. And so come off target from there, and his radio call, he says, "We're taking fire from the southeast. We need immediate gun run from on that southeast position." And so I read back like, "Okay, you need a gun run to the southeast. Confirm how far to the southeast." And he's like, "Along the tree line." I'm like, "Perfect." Again, so I read back a 9-line sort of that I made up as I'm circling around to the west, and then yeah, 4 more gun passes, and every one of them it was just okay. I see a position, I read it to him. Yep, that's it. In from the west on that, and as I'm climbing up after each pass, I'll just like look over the shoulder of the jet, and I could pick out another set of muzzle flashes in the area. And then he would talk me on, yep, I need you about 30 meters east, 30 meters west, whichever it is on those, and then just continue employing there. So it's about a 5 minute span of like 5 gun passes around that area.
Leroy, talk about a simple solution to fix that problem there. Picking that tree line and adjusting your fires from there. You know, it's sometimes a simple solution that's the best solution. Having that tree line there and then adapting and adjusting, because there's nothing in your training. You didn't roll in that day knowing you're going to have a tree line, but adapting to the situation that you're dealt with
Exactly.
in order to affect its outcome is vital.
Yeah. Like you said, tree line, it's just that TRP something. There's a field, a tree line, another field to the north. And once you kind of build your picture and you share it with the JTAC, that it just made it so much easier to lock in on a spot when the weather was, that 1.5 2 mile viz, mesh of crappy weather.
Dude, yeah, you're working here. So you repel that attack, and then you're probably getting a little low on gas. Jammer gets back to the fight. Now it's your turn to go off to the tanker.
Yeah. I passed the 2-9 lines and what are the updates to our friendly positions, and then am off into the weather. And then once I got up to the altitude, and I had been working my numbers for the divert to Diyarbakir, which is like our closest rescue base in Turkey. But when I got up to altitude and knew I was in the soup, I looked at my gas again and knew I didn't really have much to spare. I was like, all right, guys, I'm diverting to Diyarbakir. You come find me, please. And so I had them overfly me. And I think I was 17, they were 18 or 18, 19. I worked myself up to 500 feet below them. And it was just this little hole in the weather, and you see the boom sticking out of it. And I'm like, stop. And then I remember the guy in the 135, he goes, I've never worked that hard to find a refueler or find an A-10 or someone to get gas. And I just laughed. I was like, well, I appreciate it, because you made my job pretty easy. I just diverted and you came and found me.
Talk about, yeah, dude. And I know you're laughing about it now, but you're over enemy territory. You've just been in a big firefight, and you're now worried about being able to make it back to a safe spot.
Yeah.
So, like the stress is not let up, but that's pretty incredible that able to facilitate that. And, hats off to the tanker crew. Those guys definitely had some downrange that they would bend over backwards to make it happen.
Exactly.
So without them, none of it would be possible. So it's always nice. Like that's a big sigh of relief when you hook up to the tanker there.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that was huge. Meanwhile, I had my other radio still monitoring what Jammer was doing, and another attack started, and she was IDing RPG fire and rolling in on her own as well. So it was like, you hear all I wanted to do is get back into the fight, but at the same time, I was about to divert and completely leave her out there. So it was one of those like, I need gas, please.
Leeroy, you and Jammer did some incredible work there. And it's a testament to the training that you had, preparing for what was potentially out there and what would come while you're back home training. But then your ability to adapt to a dynamic situation, being flexible, and then applying some simple solutions, what would seem like a very complex problem. And it is a complex problem. You got people who are shooting, and it's dynamic on the ground. And again, it's just a testament to your training and your preparation that go into it. But during that period, you guys were on station for 5 hours, supporting troops in contact, 2.5 hours doing yo-yo ops back and forth. Between you and Jammer, you both expended 1,500 pounds of ordnance and over 1,300 rounds of 30 millimeter, eliminating 19 ISIS targets and 83 ISIS fighters. And your actions, along with Jammer that day, are attributed to saving 50 American lives and countless coalition partners, which again earned both you and Jammer the Distinguished Flying Cross for your actions that day, which is, again, hats off to the professionalism and the airmanship of both you and Jammer for everything that you guys did to prepare for that day, and your ability to take that training and apply it in a tough situation and save lives. Well, Leeroy, as we wrap up our conversation today, I definitely think there's some key takeaways here. Hard work. No matter what you do, it's going to require hard work if you want to be the best at it. You got to get after it, push through it, be dedicated. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. So long as you learn from those mistakes and fix them for the next time. And then when you do make a mistake, don't let that snowball. Don't let that one mistake affect the rest of the situation or the rest of the environment that you're dealing with right then in the moment. And then be adaptive. Sometimes a simple solution can solve your problem, but every scenario is going to be dynamic. It might be extreme like the situation you were faced with that day, but ultimately be adaptive. Roll with the punches, come up with solutions, solve the problem. Leeroy, thanks again for joining me here. It was great catching up with you and look forward to staying in touch and seeing what you accomplish.
Awesome.
In the next 10 years.
Yeah, dude. Definitely. It's been fun.
Well, thanks again for joining me on the Afterburn podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to wherever you're listening, hit subscribe, and leave me a review. Again, that makes a difference for me. And if you're looking for additional content, head on over to Instagram at rainwaters27. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another guest and another podcast. But until then, don't bring a week.